Before you've been blessed with a pair of elytra, getting around the outer end aisles really is a massive pain. The whole place is designed to make you take a gamble. You can't navigate very well because you'll keep meeting these impassable chasms of nothingness. You get these little islands which are practically egging you to toss an enderbell. Go on, throw it. You're not going to hit the side and lose everything. Your only somewhat safe option is to swallow your pride and bridge across. But these chasms can be hundreds of blocks wide, and you're probably going to have to cross quite a few of them until you find a city. That's a lot of blocks, especially when you're supposed to pack pretty lightly when visiting the outer end. Minecraft 1.13 has added a bunch of new stuff to our tool belt, and I'm convinced there's something in it that's going to let us beat the previously unbeatable End Void. So I'm gonna go ask Wiley if he has any tips for us, subscribe if you like what you see. I'm Simply Sark, and let's find out if it's possible to jump over the End Void in Minecraft 1.13. To begin, let's see what we're working with. Our prize looms on the horizon, but there's a very big problem. This chasm is 230 blocks wide. It's an absolute beast and one of the most challenging of its kind. The first experiment is, well, can't we just lob an enderpearl across? Let's give it a shot. Unfortunately, enderpearls can only be thrown roughly 50 blocks away. This just isn't going to cut it. We literally throw like a little girl. From the get-go, I was positive the slow falling potion was going to play a big part in all of this. In fact, if all goes well, we might just be able to float all the way across. So I took a running jump to see just how far it would take me. By the time I was approaching Y0, I'd actually managed to travel 50 blocks, which wasn't too bad. I tried to improve the distance with a speed potion, but it didn't seem to change much. Combining this tactic with an enderpearl toss, we can achieve a total of around 100 blocks, which is decent, but still not even half the chasm. I felt what we needed was a rapid burst of speed, something much faster than sprinting. Then I remembered blue ice. Blue ice is like ice and packed ice, except it's even more slippery. Using the boat trick, you can achieve incredibly high speeds, so I put it to the test to see if this mechanic could be used to blast across a significant part of the void. It started out looking pretty good. We're getting the promised high speeds, but unfortunately as soon as the boat left the ice, everything grinded to a halt. There was no residual push. I wasn't really super fond of this idea either way. Not only did it require lots of block placing, which eliminates the purpose, but blue ice is expensive and not something you could just throw away so hastily. The next test was never going to work, but I wanted to see if the burst of speed idea still had some merit. I tried using a dolphin and a watery runaway. This was completely impractical because it needs lots of blocks, but also you'd just never be able to get a dolphin out here easily. Nevertheless, the dolphin's grace effect seemed like it might give me the speeds I was after. Tried it out, and we did manage to get a little bit further, around 70 blocks when all was said and done. But sadly, this still wasn't getting anywhere close, so I figured we needed a brand new strategy of attack. Instead of trying to get across fast, I thought a better idea would be to hitch a ride and latch onto something. Obviously, there are no blocks to target, but enderpearls actually still work even if what you're colliding with is just an entity. Remember in Super Mario when you could sacrifice Yoshi to get that little bit further? Yeah, we're gonna do that. The challenge now was to somehow get an entity out there into the void long enough for us to throw an enderpearl at them. I wondered for a while what entity would be a good candidate. It needs to be easy to bring along or summon, and preferably has a nice big hitbox to aim at. I quite liked the idea of lingering potions. You can create them anywhere, they actually have a huge hitbox, and best of all, they don't have any gravity whatsoever. The problem now was how on earth do you get it into the void? I was thinking I'd be able to slide it out there like a giant hockey puck, but I soon discovered that wasn't going to work. The cloud didn't seem to react to any force I could think of. Pistons didn't move it, neither did slime blocks apparently. Water did absolutely nothing. It was completely immune to explosion force from TNT. It couldn't be hooked with a fishing rod, and I tried to intimidate it, but this cloud proved to be the most stubborn jerk in the world. I also later realised it didn't actually have a collision box, so an enderpearl wouldn't have been able to hit it either way. Instead, I decided to try entities that'd be a little more cooperative. My first thought was a snow golem. They're very cheap and you can just spawn them anywhere you like. I figured a decent idea would be to throw a slow falling potion on the dude, then hit him with some snowballs to knock him out into the void. In fairness, this did not work, but the golem was descending much faster than I'd hoped for, and I wasn't able to knock him that far until he succumbed to his destiny. To try and get more distance, I had the excellent idea to use a punch tubo instead of snowballs. It knocked him, but because the health is so low, he was instantly obliterated. We clearly needed something more heavy duty, so we tried iron golems. I didn't love the idea because 4 iron blocks a pop is massively more expensive than 2 snow blocks, but they do have lots of health and a pretty large hitbox too. Tested the punch bar out, and honestly, the golem went pretty dang far. But the issue remained that mobs were still falling far too quickly. The slow falling effect wasn't nearly potent enough, and they couldn't be suspended for very long. It seemed we needed something that could already float or fly, and then the obvious hammer crashed down my head and I remembered chickens are in this game. Chickens are easy to spawn, they can sort of fly, let's give it a crack. Because chickens already have floaty abilities, something different happens when you give them a slow falling potion. The effects stack and they descend at an absolute snail crawl. This is the exact behaviour we're after. But chickens do have some notable drawbacks. Of course, when you spawn them from an egg, they're chicks, which means they have a tiny little hitbox, very tricky to hit from a distance. Chickens' health isn't really much better than snow golems, so punch bows won't work, and worst of all, chicks have a minuscule render distance. In fact, they just disappear after 20 blocks. I racked my brain, trying to think if there was some other option, and it came to me. There was in fact something similar to a chicken: parrots. These guys actually can fly and don't really need a slow falling buff to stay in the air, and they're pets, so they're easy to bring along with you to the outer end isles. Their health is still pretty weak, but the hitbox is better than the chickens. This was the best we had so far, so I put it to the test. Because falling isn't a problem with parrots, I decided the weaker knockback of snowballs wasn't as big of an issue as it was with other mobs. The idea was that we're going to knock a parrot about 40 blocks with snowballs, then lob a pearl at it. Prior to 1.13, this wouldn't have been feasible because you'd never have had enough time to aim pearls in midair, but with a slow falling effect, you have a little more leeway. With your 40 block head start, you'd begin throwing a new pearl at the parrot in quick succession, each hit pushing you further ahead. The thing is, this actually works. It is possible to get to the other side of the chasm using this trick, but there are some downsides. It requires a lot of ender pearls. I mean, they're cheap in a place like this, but even still. Parrots are also seriously overattached. If you push them too far away, they'll just teleport back to you. Although, on the other hand, this makes the parrots infinitely reusable. But I think most importantly, this technique is very risky. One poorly timed throw and you are toast. All in all, this trick works, but it doesn't feel that much more convenient than just bridging, and you're putting a lot more risk on your shoulders attempting it. So we're right back to square one. At this point, the Void is preparing its victory speech, and it's all looking rather grim. And then I remembered something else from 1.13. Something that, if used in tandem with slow falling, might solve this whole problem. Riptide. Riptide is of course the super enchantment that lets you transform into a tunneling vortex if you're touching rain or water. Now, if it ever rained in the end, solving this would be child's play, but the only water we'll have access to is on this side of the chasm. Riptide won't last long enough to carry us all the way. But perhaps our first idea had more merit than we realised. Maybe Riptide will carry us just far enough that we'll be able to land a pearl on the other side. Gave it a shot, and it did its best. With Riptide slow falling and a pearl, I managed to achieve 125 blocks, which for some chasms is enough. Just not this one. It seems this chasm truly has beaten us. Or has it? I can tell you that this chasm is not impassable. You can jump over it, and it is with Riptide. It's just a question of speed, and it's easy to not realise you actually have the power to do this. Allow me to show you how to perform a supercharged enderpearl toss. See, this isn't actually about using a burst of speed and then throwing a pearl, it's about combining the two into one. Riptide works by accelerating you to very high speeds instantaneously, but only for a flash. What I noticed is that projectiles like pearls don't use a flat velocity, but instead add theirs onto the thrower's current velocity. Kinda like how if you threw a ball at 20 miles an hour on a bus going 30 miles an hour, the ball would actually be going 50 miles an hour. The trick is that you need to throw the enderpearl while Riptide is still in effect to benefit from the super speed. The instant you let go of the trident, immediately swap to a pearl and release it as quickly as you can. Make sure your ender distance is high enough because this thing is going to score you a home run. With an optimal pitch on flat terrain, this technique raises the usual distance from 50 to a whopping 250. How far was that chasm again? Well, look at that. Looks like we have 20 blocks to spare. So setting this up is extremely cheap and simple. All you need is a water block and 4 fence posts 2 blocks in front. The fence post will act as a safety rail to prevent you from torpedoing off into the void, but still allowing the pearl to get through. A riskier technique is to forget the safety rail and use a slow falling potion to give the pearl time to cross the gap before you fall too far. This version is easier to pull off, but is of course much more of a gamble. So, is it possible to jump over the end void? Yes it is. These are actually a walk in the park. Granted, you got a trident. But that's it. I hope very much you enjoyed. Cheers for tuning in. I've been Simply Sark, and I'll catch you next time.